The Bay of Pigs. The CIA invasion that fell apart in 3 days. The CIA trained over 1,000 Cuban exiles in secret, planning to overthrow Fidel Castro's government in a single coordinated invasion. The plan depended entirely on American air support that never actually arrived, and a popular uprising that never actually happened. Within 72 hours, nearly the entire invasion force was dead or captured, and the CIA's fingerprints were all over an operation the United States government had spent months publicly denying any involvement in. Following Fidel Castro's successful 1959 revolution that overthrew Cuba's previous government and established a new, increasingly Soviet-aligned communist government situated just 90 miles from the American coastline, the Eisenhower administration, and subsequently the incoming Kennedy administration, viewed Castro's government as a genuinely significant Cold War-era strategic threat, prompting the CIA to begin formally developing a covert plan specifically intended to overthrow Castro's government through a combination of Cuban exile military forces and indirect American support. The resulting plan called for a force of Cuban exiles, individuals who had fled Cuba following Castro's revolution and who the CIA had spent months secretly training at facilities in Guatemala and elsewhere specifically for this planned invasion, to land at a specific location on Cuba's southern coast, the Bay of Pigs, with the operation's underlying strategic assumption holding that the initial landing force would successfully establish a secure beachhead, and that news of the invasion would then trigger a broader popular uprising among the Cuban population against Castro's government, an uprising the invasion's planners genuinely, though ultimately incorrectly, believed the Cuban population was prepared to join once the invasion actually began. The operation, formally launched in April of 1961, proved genuinely, catastrophically compromised from its earliest stages since Cuban government intelligence had already developed considerable prior awareness that some form of exile invasion was being actively planned. Information that allowed Castro's government to maintain heightened military readiness specifically anticipating this kind of operation, meaning the invasion force lost much of its intended element of surprise even before actually landing. What proved genuinely, decisively catastrophic to the operation's actual execution was President Kennedy's specific decision to scale back the planned American air support considerably from what CIA planners had originally requested, a decision driven substantially by Kennedy's own genuine concern regarding maintaining plausible deniability of direct American military involvement. Since the entire operation's underlying strategic premise depended on the invasion appearing to be a genuinely independent Cuban exile operation rather than a direct, formally acknowledged American military action, a diplomatic consideration that, however strategically reasonable in isolation, left the actual landing force considerably more exposed to Cuban government air power than the operation's original planning had assumed would be the case. The invasion force, landing at the Bay of Pigs on April 17, 1961, found itself facing considerably more effective, better prepared Cuban military resistance than planners had anticipated, while simultaneously lacking the full air support the operation's original planning had assumed would be available to protect the landing force from Cuban aircraft, a combination of factors that meant the invasion force found itself increasingly isolated and under sustained attack almost immediately following the actual landing, without the reinforcement or air cover necessary to establish and hold the secure beachhead the broader operation's success actually depended upon. Compounding these severe tactical problems, the anticipated popular uprising against Castro's government that the operation's underlying strategic assumption had specifically depended upon simply failed to materialize at anything approaching the scale planners had anticipated, meaning the invasion force found itself fighting essentially alone against considerably superior Cuban military resistance, without either the promised American air support or the anticipated domestic Cuban uprising that the operation's original planning had assumed would be necessary to actually achieve its stated objective. Within approximately 72 hours of the initial landing, the invasion had collapsed entirely, with the overwhelming majority of the roughly 1,400 exile invasion force either killed or captured by Cuban government forces, a catastrophic, rapid operational failure that represented a genuinely significant, embarrassing early foreign policy setback for the newly inaugurated Kennedy administration, made considerably more diplomatically awkward by the fact that direct American government involvement in planning and supporting the operation, despite the administration's careful efforts to maintain plausible deniability, became genuinely, publicly apparent almost immediately given the operation's sheer scale and the captured exile prisoners' own direct testimony regarding American training and support. The captured exile prisoners remained held by Cuban authorities for approximately 20 months following the failed invasion, before their eventual release was successfully negotiated in December of 1962 through an agreement involving a substantial exchange of American food and medical supplies for the prisoners' freedom, formally concluding the specific human aftermath of the operation, though the broader failed invasion's genuine strategic and diplomatic consequences, including its significant direct contribution to further escalating tensions between the United States and Cuba that would culminate in the following year's considerably more severe Cuban Missile Crisis, extended considerably beyond this specific prisoner resolution. What makes the Bay of Pigs invasion endure as one of history's most significant examples of covert operation failure isn't simply the operation's rapid, complete collapse itself, genuinely catastrophic as that specific failure remains, but the specific, instructive combination of flawed underlying strategic assumptions, an anticipated uprising that never occurred, and the genuine tension between maintaining plausible deniability and providing the actual military support an operation of this scale genuinely required, a combination that transformed a secretly planned invasion into one of the most publicly, diplomatically damaging foreign policy failures of the entire Kennedy administration's tenure. If stories like this, where an entire secret invasion depended on two separate assumptions that both turned out to be wrong at exactly the same time, are exactly what you come here for, subscribe to The Grave Details, because history holds more stories like this than most people will ever know.